So, for those of you that don't know Becca Moros, she's played every season of NWSL, correct?
No, I missed the first season. I was still playing in Japan after the WPS folded.
And you played in WPS.
Yeah.
So, all those teams, how many teams total have you played on since turning pro?
11 seasons. I had 2 in Japan, 2 in Kansas City, 2 in DC, 2 in Utah. Everything else was like 1 or team was bought, traded. Oh, yeah, it's a lot of teams. I haven't thought about that.
To your
Yeah.
page, don't forget Magic Jack.
Well, I didn't, but they bought us from DC, so I didn't move. But then I was traded halfway through that season to Western New York, so which was the best thing that could have happened to me that year. So I've been very lucky with a lot of the trades.
Well, speaking of Western New York, since they won the final in 2011, and it's the weekend of the championship game. Talk about that final. It was Western New York Flash versus Philadelphia Independence. 1-1 draw goes to PKs, but talk about that game. Or memories of that game, memories of that team.
There was a squirrel that came on the field. 10-minute delay as people chased the squirrel.
It made the highlight reel on ESPN.
Yeah, it was funny. I know Barney was like watching the squirrel for like 15 minutes before anybody else noticed it. It was like, is this safe or not? You know? But yeah, I mean, the WPS was a special time for me, starting my career there. Played with some absolutely amazing players. That really seeing them play and the level of their game changed, the trajectory of my game and made my whole career. One player of note was Homari Sawa, who I played with in DC. But when I got traded to Western New York, I had Marta, Sink, and Carolyn Sager as our like front three. And man, they were like outstanding. I think Marta had something like 13 goals and 9 assists, and Sink had like 12 assists and 9 goals, and it was like, play the ball forward, you never see it again. So it was an outstanding experience for me. And then obviously on the heels of that really excellent experience, the league folded, which was, I think, traumatic for a lot of us, and probably a lot of fans as well.
What did you do for 2012? So that the year between, or I guess that's when you went to Japan.
I went to Japan. So after my rookie season, Sawa had been on my team, and I was just blown away by her as a player. Just like completely, I'd never seen anybody play soccer the way she did. And she very generously helped me go to Japan for 3 months in the off season. So I trained with her team in Tokyo, which Yuki Nagasato played on that team at that time. Go Yuki. And like a lot of the Olympic gold medalists who ended up being in the US and Canada. But then that team, after playing there for 3 months when the league folded, I knew Japan was the best learning experience I could have. And so I took the leap. And then that's the best team I've ever played on. And so when the league started up the following year, I stayed in Japan a second year, just to finish out that experience rather than running back here.
So the decision to return to the U.S. was, hey, there's a league again?
Yeah, my mom actually got breast cancer when I was in Japan the second year. I was very isolated, so it was a tough experience for me. So by the time that second year was over, I was desperate to come home. Like, it was just time for me. But as far as the soccer experience, the learning experience, culture experience, I fell in love with studying Japanese. It's the most meaningful thing I've ever done. So when young players want to talk about going overseas or what opportunities they can't have here, partly because the league hasn't expanded in a number of years. So a lot of young players aren't quite getting the opportunities that players like me had when I was young. Going overseas is just an outstanding opportunity to learn and grow and challenge yourself, be an independent person. So
how did you end up we were with what, Kansas City the first year coming in?
No, Portland. I was claimed by the Discovery thing by Seattle. And then my semi-negotiated contract was traded to Portland before I was ever even back in the United States. So that was, I was happy to be in Portland. I had a cousin who lived in Portland. Portland seemed really close to New York, which is where I'm from. Once I've been in Japan, so I felt like I was like right near my family. It's just not true. But yeah, so I started my career in Portland, on my NWSL career in Portland. Yeah.
And then was it Kansas City
Yeah, I was
2015.
traded to Kansas City, which actually in 2014, I drove up to Seattle to watch the final between Seattle and Kansas City, and watching that game, I was like, oh, this is the team I belong on. And like a month later, I was traded, and I'm like, well,
There you
written
go.
in the stars, you can put it anywhere. And somehow I ended up in Kansas City, so I was very pleased with that, yeah.
So thoughts on Vlatko Nanovsky as the new U.S. national team coach?
He's outstanding. I think he's going to be the best thing for women's soccer. I think he has tremendous respect for the level of the professional game, both in the United States and around the world. And I think that that's been lacking in terms of the relationship between U.S. soccer and the NWSL. It seems like the NWSL is always considered lesser, rather than these are all the players who almost made the national team, but only 20 get to go, or 23, or whatever it is. It's like these players are here, and these players are here. And the difference between the players is like tiny, except for salaries. So it's actually pretty amazing that the players making $20,000 and $25,000 are able to compete against $1 million athletes as well as they do. So I think he has tremendous respect for that sacrifice. And so I think that's going to be really huge for the players, for the league, for fans. It's just going to be a lot more respect going all around.
So 2015, you're with Kansas City, 2016 in Houston, and then back to Kansas City for
Yeah.
2017.
I was traded after we won a championship in 2015 because of some shady negotiations from the ownership group that eventually got pushed out. So when a new ownership group came in, I was quite pleased to be able to be traded back. But yeah,
And then end of 2017, Kansas City folds. So talk about hearing the news that it's over, but it's not over, and you're going to Utah.
Yeah, I mean, Vlatko created the most professional environment in the least professional place. So I think we all loved our soccer experience in Kansas City, and people are still attached to that experience, anybody who played there, and appreciate what Kansas City was for us, but Utah is 9 million times more professional in terms of the environment, the support. So it was an upgrade, like for sure, and obviously seeing Vlatko in Seattle, and then getting Laura to come back into the league in Utah because it looked like she was taking off. You know, those were all good things for everybody. So.
Well, talk about this season, the challenge for you being injured a lot of the season. How does that affect your day-to-day compared to what the rest of the players are going through, and how do you stay connected to?
Yeah, injury is really isolating. It's kind of a selfish time because it's really all about you. And so as a player, there's definitely an opportunity to engage with the team more intentionally because your role isn't defined by what you do on the field. So, you know, being good teammates, supporting other people. I spend a lot of time with the rookies. I really enjoy, you know, talking to them about their game, helping them train. So I feel like I got a lot of time, like a lot out of my injured time, but it sucks. I've been extremely lucky. I'm 34. I've been very healthy. I've been able to play a lot with a lot of changing environments, which statistically you're most likely to get injured when you change coaches, change clubs, and there's just been a lot of instability in the league. So I've had to do that a lot of times. I'm really good at creating a great off-season environment, so I've been lucky with that. But being injured sucks, and I've never had a year like this. It was like I also got diagnosed with mono in preseason, which took us a month and a half to figure out. So I think that kind of set me up for failure in general. But it makes you appreciate, you know, all the times you get away with stuff and don't end up injured. There's a lot of luck involved in that stuff too.
So 2018-2019 was the first back-to-back seasons in NWSL where you were with the same club. So what was that like compared to the previous 4 seasons?
Well, in Utah, I think we've underperformed for 2 years in a row, so there's definitely a lot of discontent, frustration there. I think for the entire organization, I think everyone's kind of on the same page with that. You know, underperforming is disappointing. Obviously, only one team gets to win, and only 2 teams get to compete for that chance. So most people fail, you know, along that journey. But the way we failed, I don't think anyone's happy with. And so, you know, it's 2 years in one place, but like things have to change, and so that might be player personnel, which we're all aware of, like trades are probably coming, could be staff stuff, you know. I know that club wants to be one of the best clubs in the world, not just in this league, so, you know, they gotta do something. And we all wanna win too, so whatever that means, like, we're all dying to win, so, you know, this is really reducing my, my stats. I mean, a lot of postseasons until the last 2 years. It's sort of depressing.
Well, and so at age 34, are you looking ahead to, okay, what's the end game for my career, and what things are you working on so that there's a career that follows?
Yeah. I want to coach. I want to coach in this league. I want to coach against coaches I've played against and played for. I want to coach the players that are in this league. I mean, I think that'd be outstanding. I'm pretty aware that I may need to start out somewhere else. I've always coached kids in the off season and since I left college, so I do have like some experience, not obviously at this high of a level, but that's what I want to do. I also want to get a master's, either in stats or business management or something that'd be useful for coaching and a bunch of other things. So I have a lot of goals. I have a small company. I started a training company that does it's a portable wall for soccer training. So I got a lot of things I'm interested in. They're all related to soccer, and I definitely want to use the experience that I have and share that with the next generation.
Question, potentially loaded question that we won't share outside this room, but who would be your best
That's
11?
Cary.
You don't have to answer
Well,
that.
did you notice how different the NWSL Players Association? Yeah. So internally, I think the players would vote very differently than the star-studded 11 that was picked by the
I just found it so
NWSL.
strange when I was like, wait, players have 40%, and we know the NWSL Players Awards. So
where's the discrepancy?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
where did the math doesn't add up.
I saw some emails about,
Like media having issues, like voting. and
But that's
something.
lack of that's not being able to vote.
I know, but if
that
you
still
look
doesn't
at
speak to why.
the people
Yeah.
who were
Anyway,
able to
I'm-
vote
I'm-
aren't the
I'm
good
just- I'm
media.
distracted.
I mean, so it's.
But
So,
so
yeah.
it was shady though. So
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's
we
no
noticed.
other word
we
for
noticed too.
it. Yeah. How involved are you with the NWSL Players Association?
I've been tasked with a number of things. So I helped create our basically our alumni network. That's been kind of my baby, and we're really working hard to bring in alumni from WUSA, from national teams past, anybody who's had a contract in the United States, internationals as well, but anybody who's played here in one of the leagues or for the national team, to create a bigger group of people that can help sort of this game tip. And I think that that's a major thing that's been lost, is that the identification with being a former pro player in the U.S. is really disconnected. There's people I play with who I don't know if I've ever seen them at another game or anything like that, and they might have had, a 6-year career of their own, and they're not attached to the league, they're not connected to the game, and I think that's a huge problem. So one of the things we're also trying to do is make sure that all alumni are, invited back to these games, and there could be some kind of alumni event where people who have played can come in and just be a part of the environment and, renew
Be
that
acknowledged.
connection. Yeah, and that too, but even just to have that sort of network kept alive. I think I have one piece of gear that has an NWSL logo on it, that's it. So I've got nothing from the league that says, we're a thing, and I can wear that around and be proud of it. So I think that's a little bit weird from the league standpoint. That brand is just not as big as it should be. So yeah, I was tasked with that. I was also part of the group that figured out the players' dues stuff for the NWSL Players Association, and figuring out how we were gonna launch that and ask people who don't make a lot of money to fork over money. So that took a while to figure out how we were gonna do that.
did the
But yeah.
players respond well to that?
They did. I think people didn't have a choice. We didn't really give them an opportunity to not do it. But it's really essential. Like, we're gonna need a collective bargaining agreement, and there's a ton of injuries this year, and I don't think that's gonna stop. So we need to make sure players are protected and can go on and have good lives after they play.
You guys are one of my donations every year.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of people who really supported us, and it's really important. So, but I think the young players. I was a young player a long time ago, and you kind of don't appreciate that stuff until you're a little bit older. So, getting some of the young players to buy in and pay attention, because they're the ones who are going to be most benefited by these improvements, and having a voice in the room with the owners and the league. And so, kind of getting them to be a little bit more active, because the torch is going to get passed really fast, and they're not necessarily prepared to do that, because it just hasn't been a thing
Any questions for Becca?
Yeah.
You brought up Sawa.
Uh-huh.
Gabara didn't know what to do with her.
No,
Oh, thank God.
not even close.
And everybody, when they say, well, why did they fire Gabara? Well, let's go back to WPS. He had, what was she, like in her mid-20s? He had her at the peak?
No, she was at the end of her game, but that was
In WPS?
that was even it was even more spectacular. I mean, she was so good.
And he couldn't play her.
He didn't have the right team for her. First of all, we had Kat Whitehill in the back and Abby Wambach up top, so we were not a midfield dominant team because of those personalities, and so she just got skipped a lot. The other thing is because she was older, it was easy for them to be like, oh, well, she's at the end of her career. Needless to say, she just won the Ballon d'Or, and then so I followed her back to Japan after my first season with her, and she was so freaking good in Tokyo. I couldn't even believe it, and I just don't think they understood the level that she could play at. She's not an individual player, so like she needs people to move and do different things. So, you know, in Japan you have 3 or 4 runners happening on every single pass. So like you can look this way and play there, you can look this way, look this way, look this way, and then a 4th run is coming through the, you know what I mean? And here it was like she'd get caught and there'd be no runners anywhere, and it didn't really.
And Jim blamed her.
I think he didn't know what to do with her. I think, you know, he really didn't. I had never seen someone like Sal before, like literally have to pick up with foreign guys all the time, and they're outstanding.
Coach.
She was so good. I mean, she could have.
We'll have a
team.
Washington
She
Freedom
was so
Therapy
good.
session later.
Will it cover the Burke year too?
They're doing really well now.
They're doing well, but he's
They look
an
outstanding.
ass.
Young team. I mean, they're gonna be great for years to come.
Yeah.
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 Took them a while to
Let's see
get it
who
right.
he says something horrible to next.
Possible it might happen, but they seem to respect him. I've gone on the inside and asked questions, so they seem to think he's a good coach. So.
Now, all my questions have been answered by the parents of kids who coached him.
Yeah, but
I heard about that.
but at least the NWSL players have an avenue
Yeah.
to
That
make a
is good.
complaint.
That's good.
Yeah.
You mentioned more and less pro environments in terms of the technical environment,
Uh-huh.
not the infrastructure build out, but
Yeah.
the technical environment. Can you articulate, like, from a player's perspective, 3 or 4 keys to saying that's a pro environment for me as a player?
So our soccer environment was extremely professional. Balaka was the first person into the office and locker rooms every single day, every day. He was the first person onto the field, and he was the last person to leave the field. If anybody was training, he was on the field and he'd stay there till the end. Coaches I've had that are last people onto the field, first people off the field, it's just not a good sign. We did film after every single game, win or lose. He sat and did film with each individual player, so you watched every one of your touches. He did not blow smoke, he was direct with you, that was shit. If you do that again, you will never play here.
Wow.
And, you know, this, and this was outstanding. And players love that. There's a lot of people who blow smoke, and it's like it is the first thing that just drives a wedge between the players and the coaches. Another thing is that he didn't hang out in the locker room and socialize with people. He created separation so that the players had each other's backs instead of, you know, oh, these 3 players are kind of in with the coach and like they can do whatever they want, and then these players are like get shit on in practice and like so. I think he played until he was like 39 or something. He coached men, so he's used to being, you know, yelled at by, you know, people because women are just really a lot nicer than guys on the field. And so, you know, he had a lot of experience. He was like a player's coach that way. So definitely making friends with players is like, that is like, you know, playing with fire. Because it can really divide a team super, super fast. There's a bunch of coaches that well, there's some in this league that the players don't like them very much. But the players are so tight around. I mean, when I was in Western New York, we didn't like the coach. Every time he tried to talk to Marta, she pretended she didn't speak English. So like, you know, it was like, but we won a championship because, you know what, the training sessions were good. He stayed over there. We had each other's backs, and that was that, you know? I mean, it's competitive sports. You're trying to be friends with people you're trying to step on to get onto the field. So it's a really touchy environment, but keeping it professional and, you know, meritocracy and having very clear standards and being willing to state them and hold that line. You know, female players want that as much as male players, and they're not gonna, you know, curse out the coach when they don't do it. But that was, so on the field, I would say the locker rooms and things like that in our league matter a lot less because everybody's willing to make sacrifices just to play. And so obviously the standards being good enough is really important, but people aren't really demanding that much. It's just a safe environment. And then developing. I'm 34 and still want to develop. As soon as you stop learning, you get bored. You're less engaged with everything that's going on. And that's how we got here from the beginning, and that's how we, identify with the game. So just making sure the environment is still all about learning and growing and touching on players as individuals as well as within the team. I think that goes a long way.
Awesome. Any last questions?
Yes.
Brent?
I was gonna ask, what is one thing that the league has done previously that's the biggest thing as a player, and then what is the biggest thing you want them to do going forward?
Sustaining, being here after year 7, I mean, that's big. And I know a lot has gone into that, a lot of hard decisions. You can't really do everything right, because as soon as you're doing right in one way, you're kind of doing wrong in another. So clearly they've made a lot of good enough decisions to get us here. So that's huge. And obviously they're bringing in better and better ownership groups that are pushing the standards of the league and creating opportunities for future sustainability. So that's a really big deal. I'm waiting for the league to create its own superstars. Like, I'm tired of seeing them go pick the national team players and just ride on those reputations. I mean, those reputations are made by US Soccer, and I'm waiting for them to create their own superstars. You got the games, you got the clips, you got the highlights. There's players playing outstanding, and just like we grab for the same big names. But once the league is big enough to make their own stars, then you'll know that like the league is there, that the product is worthy. They need to do that.
So you talked a little bit about going overseas and stuff, and I know, especially like in men's soccer, there's the saying, Europe's where you want to go. That's where the highest competition is and whatnot. And NWSL has all this great competition. But do you still think that it should not required, but should be a stepping stone for younger players to go to Europe and expand and then maybe come back home?
Well, the women's game is obviously a different landscape than the men's, and so I think that can go either direction. Some people go overseas and come back and use what they learned there to be, create their own kind of identity the way I did and come back in and have a long career here. I wish I went to Japan when I was 15, I mean, it was just changed my life. So going as soon as you can does have, its value. Not every experience is that good. I could have gone overseas 10 different times and never had an experience like that. So there's obviously, you got to get lucky with any experience, whether it's here or somewhere else. And then I think, players playing here, making their careers here, and then being able to go get contracts in Real Madrid and Barcelona and PSG, I mean, those are huge things. I know Chelsea is, is doing a lot. Man City's doing a lot. I think the landscape of women's soccer is about to completely change, because here we have a 7-month season. Kids play 4 years in college, which is a 3.5-month season. It's really a terrible developmental landscape. We do a really good job in the United States of keeping the greatest number of players active for a long time, so we have a much bigger player pool than in other countries, but the development of those players is really lacking. By the time I went to Japan the first time, I was playing with kids who were 5 years younger than me and played the same number of professional seasons that I had, or more. And so they're playing 10 months a year. And once you start doing that, you really you do the math. You can't compete with that. So when these players start playing for Real Madrid and Barcelona, and they're in those environments for 10 months of the year, it's going to be like a major challenge to the United States to step up and to really develop players in like big windows. So I think there's going to be some change that the U.S. is going to be forced to face just by those massive clubs coming into women's soccer. Yeah.
Awesome. Any last questions? Okay, I'm gonna set up Becca in the back so that you guys can get autographs and pictures real quick, and then you can grab a water or something, and then we'll do trivia to wrap things up. So, thank you, Becca.